Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz and it is the first of the month, which means it's time for another emergency card kit. If you're new to the channel, an emergency card is one where we make the card ahead of time, but we leave the sentiment off. That way, when we need a card, we can choose a style that fits the person and a sentiment that fits the occasion. It just makes it a little easier to find the perfect card. In this kit, we have Father's Day and graduation. And as I was putting this together, I just kept thinking about how hard it is to find sentiments for dudes. So I need your help. In the comments below, please let me know what kind of sentiments would you love to have for the men in your lives. I have the classics on here. To a grill master who's rare, you're tool-rific, right? But my husband is not a grill master and he does not use tools or go camping or fishing. He is an introverted, nerdy, computery kind of guy. And I like him like that. So I have plans for sure to include some nerdy sentiments in there, but I would love to know what kind of sentiments would be great for the guys in your life. I also would love to know if you are looking for other kinds of sentiments. We've gone through quite a few already, right? We've done birthday, sympathy, get well. We've done a bunch. I will link the playlist to all of the emergency card kits at the end of this video. But there's a handful more that we still need to get to. And I'm looking to at least create a list of priorities. Like, what do we want the most? So here, this is a free printable. It's absolutely free for subscribers. I will include instructions later in the video for how to get this, but you have 2 pages of sentiments. They are the same sentiments, both with and without a circle around them. Again, we have to an amazing father-in-law, you're like a father to me, world's best grandpa. I wanted to try to include most of the fathers in our lives. I like the front page. It has a circle around it, and I use my EK Success 1 3/4 inch punch, and I just wiggle it until I can't see the circle, and then I know it's centered. That circle's just a little bit bigger. But on the second page, I could use a different shape or a different size, and that works really well. There is also a page of insides. We've done this a couple of times. Huge shout out to Dottie, who sent me some Father's Day sentiments, and they are sort of mixed in on the small circle sentiments and the insides. So this is one of hers. Happy Father's Day. Oh, I mean father, right? Then this graduation one, you know what would make this even better? A funny hat. And then there's either a graduation cap or a wizard's hat, which I find hilarious. But then again, I laugh at myself a lot. To a grill master who's rare, I hope your day is well done. So we have 3 pages of sentimenty related things. The next page is our card overview, and it is going to give you all of the measurements and instructions you need to assemble your card. But I'm going to give you some tips and tricks along the way. And spoiler alert, there's another page behind this one with more ideas for layouts. So I am starting with an A2 card base. I have a top folding card. Side folding would also work just fine. I don't want mine to be white, so I've also cut an A2 panel at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Next, I cut my matte layer and my patterned paper. The patterned paper is 3 1/4 by 4 1/2. And I'm going to put it right on top, and I like mine to have a very narrow margin. So that is 3 3/8 by 4 5/8. But if you don't like eighths, then do 3 1/2 by 4 3/4. That would be fine as well. Then I have 3 strips of solid colored cardstock that coordinate with my matte layer. I like a thin strip for this. If I was going to cut them by hand, I would cut them at 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so let's look at that. On my trimmer, there are marks every 1/4 of an inch. The 1/8 of inches are marked here. They're not really easy to see and line up with my paper. Okay, so here's my paper. It's right on 1/4 of an inch. If I cut that, okay, it's about like that. Mine are cut to 3/16. I'll explain that in a minute. It's a little bit thinner. Then if I go right in between the 2 lines, right in the middle, nothing fancy, that is an 1/8 of an inch. So if I compare the two, There's a significant difference. I think especially on the template we're about to make, smaller is better, but it doesn't really matter what size they are as long as they're all the same size. I cut mine at 3/16 of an inch because I used some dies. I bought the ones from scrapbook.com because they were the cheapest and they're great. Like I wasn't sure I needed them, but I felt like I was throwing away a lot of cardstock scraps because I couldn't use them. If I grab something like this out of my scrap bin and I stick that in my trimmer, I can start cutting strips until I get to about an inch. And then I don't have a whole lot of control about whether or not it's straight. Like my ledge all along the bottom kind of disappears. It's hard to see. It's hard to hold on to. But I can just put my strip die on here and cut. And I lose always a little bit because I tape mine on there and I want something to tape it to, but I don't lose near as much as I did before. So if you're interested, I'll link them below, but you can totally cut these by hand. Okay, let's put our card together. I am actually going to start with my patterned paper and my strips. So there's a couple ways to do this. You certainly could just lay this right on top here and make little pencil marks. And I think that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so I'm making little pencil marks on each of those, and I'm going to line up my strips to go straight across. If you don't want to print all of that out, your other option is to cut a piece of 1/2 inch cardstock, and then I'm just going to hold this along the bottom, and I'm going to put my first strip 1/2 inch from the bottom. So I'm just going to run a little line of glue right there. And because that's lined up along the bottom, now I know it's going to be straight. Okay. To get the placement for the next one, this one has no glue. I'm going to line it right up on top of there. And then I'm going to put another line of glue. And I'm going to lay the next one. So I have this equal gap right between the two. I am going to trim off a little bit from the side. We have not put it on the matte layer yet because we want to be able to trim off of the side. So I'm going to take off these edges, and then I will use the longest one to line up the spacing for this last one. Okay, one more time, a little line of glue, and then I'll lay my strip right on top. And when I do it this way, I know that they're straight. I know that they're parallel. I say as I'm like struggling to put this last one on here. Ignore the glue I just put on there. There's one more step. Before I attach these two, I want to punch out the circle for my sentiment from this matte layer because we're just going to cover it up. So I have my 2-inch EK Success punch, and I'm going to cut that right out of the middle. I'm going to save that. Now I will add my glue. Especially when I'm working with small margins, I find that it's really helpful to turn things sideways. And I start with the top because my eye is drawn to the top before it is drawn to the bottom. Okay. Then I'm going to attach my cardstock to my card base. And from here you have some options. Right? I can lay this straight on top and just follow the sketch. And that's a great card. I love that card. But you can also tilt it at an angle and do it that way. I'm going to do this one straight because I've already made one at an angle. I love this patterned paper. I struggle to make cards for the guys in my life. And I tell you what, one of the things they all have in common is that they love games. They love board games. They love video games. You name it. If they can win, they want to play. That's me too. I am not a video gamer, but I am a little competitive. Just a little. That's understatement. I don't know if you can tell. So I actually have pattern paper from several other pieces in that collection. These are from PhotoPlay. They came out pretty recently. So there's this one, it's Sorry, Not Sorry. And so it's got these like sorry pieces on one side and then a bunch of other classic board games on the other. This one, I showed this one to my husband, who still meets up with his old D&D group once a week. And he saw that. He was like, that's all right. Yeah, that's, it's called Roll of the Dice. And then the other side has some stripes. And so those colors coordinate with the rest of the collection. And then this one is called Your Turn and just has a lot of like board gamey, other gamey pieces and some puzzle pieces. I just bought individual pieces from that collection from scrapbook.com, but you can buy like a pack of all of it. There's also coordinating stamps and dies and ephemera and stuff like that. I do have the stamps and dies because I think I'll use them, but this card is done. That was so quick. You can do this with any pattern, right? It doesn't have to be a masculine card. You could certainly use, like if you can find some graduation paper at your local scrapbook store. I'm sure there's some at scrapbook.com too, but I know graduation is like upon us. You could do that here. Doesn't matter. On the last page of our printable are the 3 different layouts I've come up with for using the same basic supplies. So I have my A2 card base. This time I'm just using some gray cardstock for the whole card base, my matte layer and my pattern paper, and my 3 strips of cardstock. Again, these are 3/16 of an inch. And so here's the one we just made. If you print out this page at 100%, all of these are to scale. And so if you don't want to measure things, you don't have to. We're going to make this one next. And certainly you could use one large piece of pattern paper that is 3 1/4 by 4 1/2, just like the last one. Or you can use 3 strips of 1 1/2 inch pattern paper. You could do 3 different patterns. If you have a double-sided pattern, you could take this piece and cut it at 1 1/2 and flip this one over. That's always a really easy trick when you're looking to add some extra interest. Here's how I'm going to do it. I have my pattern paper, and I am going to use this piece of scrap cardstock that is 1 1/2 inches. Okay, and I am just going to draw a line. I'm going to cover that up in a minute. And then I'm going to go from the top and I'm going to line it up. I'm going to draw a line. That's it. Okay. I am going to glue my strips onto my pattern paper before I put it on the mat because I want to be able to trim it off. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and glue those both at the same time. Thin strip of glue. And then I'm going to use my grid mat here to make sure I'm putting those on there straight. Here's my strip. Again, I used the scrapbook.com dies to make my strips. Otherwise, 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 inch would both work here. This one, I don't think it matters as much if your strips are a little wider. And then I am lining this one up. And because it's right in the middle, I'm kind of getting an equal bit on both the top and bottom of that line. And I will just run that right across and then I'll trim it off. This is some matte silver cardstock that I got from Michael's. And I actually really like that it's super thin for this because we're going to layer on top of those strips. I'm going to add this to my mat. Like this would be a really fun one actually to flip that middle panel and create some interesting like changes in color and pattern. You guys, I forgot to cut the circle out of the back of my cardstock before I glued that down. So that's okay. I have another one. So the other thing I do when I have lots of scraps is that I cut out 2-inch circles and other emergency card sentiment circles, and I just keep them in a little bin right above my work space. So I am going to go ahead and glue this onto the card, and I can glue it straight on like we did before. But actually, there are so many straight lines here. I think I'm going to angle this one. Okay, let's angle that. And I'm not measuring anything. I'm just going to eyeball it. You can only tilt it so far before it doesn't really fit. So I want, kind of the same at the top and the bottom. Then here's my spare red circle. And I am going to glue another circle on top of this because I'm layering this up. And I want to make sure I'm not going to have lumps in the middle of it. So I'm going to go too thick on this. Then you could put it right here like we did before. I really like this one at the bottom. And that is our card. So we have 2 cards done. You know what? Let's go ahead and put some sentiments on these first 2. I like to have something on there just so I have something in case I'm in a super duper emergency. I have a couple of graduations to go to. So I think I'm going to grab, you did it. Congrats. And I'm just going to wiggle this until you can't see the circle. And then I'm going to grab World's Best Grandpa because I need a card for my dad. All right, so when I put these on, if I'm not sure that that's definitely the sentiment I'm going to use, I just have some removable adhesive. I might make this one the graduation card. And it comes off really easily, but as long as you're not pulling at it, it stays on there pretty well. So even if I forget that it's only temporarily tacked on there, it's going to be fine. And there's one from my grandpa. I have so many memories of playing Sorry with my dad, actually. I'm really excited about that now. Okay, let's make one more card. This one looks like the trickiest one, but really it's not. I'm starting with the same supplies. So I have already glued my blue cardstock onto a white card base. I have my matte layer, my patterned paper, and then here I cut 1/8-inch strips. And I just did these by hand, right? You can absolutely 100% do that by hand. I am going to start by adding my strips to my cardstock. So I am just going to line this up here and I am going to make some tick marks. So here's one, here's the other, and then I can do the same thing on the side. If you don't want to have to do that, here's the trick. If I hold this right here on my mat, those tick marks are going to take you from, here's our top, there's an inch, there's an 1.5 inches. So from 1.5 inches to 1.5 inches and from 2 inches to 2 inches. Okay, you don't have to print it out if you don't want to. And actually, it's probably easier to glue everything that way anyway. I'm going to take this scrap of cardstock and I am just going to hold that so I can see from one corner to the other. And I'm going to add a little bead of glue. Okay, these strips are thinner than the ones I used last time. That is okay. But I am going to be a little more careful with my glue to make sure it's in a straight line, which is not always my greatest skill. And then eyeball it. Make sure that it looks like there's an even gap all the way up and down. Okay. All right, there we go. I'm going to do the other side, but I'm probably going to trim this off first. I might want to use one of these to finish it up. I just rotate it around and now I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to bring this down a little so it's easier to see. So this time I'm going to remember to punch out my 2-inch circle from the center of the cardstock. And then I will glue these 2 pieces together. And then I am going to glue that onto my card base. I like this one better straight on because we already have those diagonal lines. And then here, I'm just going to overlap that one piece a little bit so I can center this guy. My husband's birthday is coming up. It is right next to Father's Day. Mine is right next to Valentine's Day, so we both end up doing doing this once a year. So I am probably going to give this to him. It says, "Happy birthday. Here's to another year of questionable life decisions." I think he'll like that one. And I am just going to temporarily adhere that on there in case I come up with something snarkier and funnier for him. So those are our 3 cards for today. If you are interested in the free printable with the 8 Father's Day sentiments, 8 graduation sentiments, both with and without the circle and the American and the Aussie British spelling, with the insides, the funny insides, along with the card overview, all of the measurements, the template to scale, and the additional card layouts, all I ask is that you subscribe to my channel. So click the subscribe button, and underneath the video, click more or show more. And then at the bottom, you'll find links to download both versions of this. Please leave me a comment letting me know what kind of sentiments you would like to see, especially if you have any masculine sentiments you've been looking for. I also would appreciate it if you'd share this with somebody you think might like to make cards like this. I appreciate you spending this time with me, and I will see you next time.